Hello. Can I just tell you, it sucks to be Isaac. That's the opening line of this homily. And as I was walking up the sidewalk this morning, the deacon's wife, and that always sounds like a trashy novel to me. The deacon's wife says to me, Gary, I still remember a long, long time ago, 1996 as a matter of fact, when you started a homily on this reading, it sucks to be Isaac. And she nailed it. But it's a whole different homily the rest, I promise, for better, for worse. We tend to think of the story we just heard as all about Abraham. Abraham being so brave, Abraham making the choice to sacrifice his son out of loyalty and fidelity to God. Abraham so courageous, Abraham so loyal, Abraham. Abe gets all the props. But do we ever look at that story from the perspective of the younger son, of Abraham, named Isaac, who was invited by his dad that day to go for a walk up a mountain? Hey, he said to Isaac, son, let's have some father-son bonding this afternoon. Let's get some quality time. By the way, Isaac was at the age of being a preteen, they tell me now, so maybe Abraham was looking forward to this sacrifice because after all, this kid was 12 or 13. I'm teasing. So as they walk, he starts to say, hey, son, can you carry this heavy knife? Or grab some stones to build an altar? Or how about bundling those sticks together for us? And the kid did not put two and two together because he was probably playing video games. Little did Isaac know, but that he was being asked to carry the sticks for his own immolation, his own demise. We never think about what it was like to be Isaac, to be the victim of other people's choices, of other people's freedom. We don't think about that much when we hear that story about Isaac, usually. But all of us are Isaacs. All of us are Isaacs every once in a while along the way. An essential aspect of love is being willing to suffer the choices of others, especially when we worry that those choices may not be in their best interest. I suspect we've all been there. Do you ever wonder if God regrets making us free? Let me tell you, there are days I regret God making people free. Their freedom costs me. Other people's freedom costs you. But so does our freedom cost them. You and I are all humans and are free, therefore free, to hate and reject God. And others are free to hate and reject us. And we can't always fix that, nor can God. God made us free to say yes to God, and free to say no to God. No to love, being as who God is. There is no love. There's no such thing as love unless the people who are trying to love each other are free. Everything else is something else. God gave us this great gift of freedom to choose. One thing I know about God is that God suffers our freedom as surely as we suffer the freedom of others. God is willing to suffer whatever it costs God to willingly suffer, excuse me one second, suffers our freedom. God is willing to suffer whatever it costs God so that we can be free to say yes or no to God. And because of it, God sometimes loses some of us along the way, which God would never want to happen. That's the suffering of God. It's the suffering of parents, too, and friends. But that's what God agreed to when God chose to make us irrevocably free. Because God made you free, God will never force you, manipulate you, control you, to get you to make the right decision, to get you to do the loving thing. Nor can we, nor can you, nor can I ever force anybody to do our will, to do what we want them to do, or manipulate them, or control them. How dare we try to do that if God doesn't? God will only seduce you, allure you, entice you to the good, to love. God will never go back on that. Ever, ever, never, ever will God go back on that. God's gift to you of your freedom and mine. Because that's the heart of love. And no matter the cost, if God is love, to go back on that would mean that God would not be God, that love would not be love. Truth is, God made himself powerless before our freedom. But honestly, it sucks. Somebody just asked me this past week, how can there be a hell? And how could God ever in infinite mercy send somebody to hell? The church teaches God doesn't send anybody there. We go there because that's the logical consequence of our choices. That's the world we were building for ourselves. Church doesn't know if anybody is in hell. But the church does understand that there has to be the possibility of hell, or we cannot love. Nobody can say yes to love if they can't say no to love. And we live with the consequences of those choices now and at the hour of our death. Nobody can say yes to us in love if they are not free to say no to us as well. Remember that, parents. And those seeking to be friends, and on your way to class and to work. I never cease to tell parents who are grieving the choices of their kids they are making, that they are suffering the suffering of God in that moment, and they are really close to God when their kids are making choices different from the choices they would have them make. They're more close to God than they know. I know it hurts. I know it's a suffering. But I'd propose to you it's the suffering of God. God can't make someone make the right decision, nor can you who are parents. That's the freedom God gave, which is the essence of what it means to be human and the essence of love. But please know, parents, when you're suffering the decisions of your adult children, you are suffering the suffering of God. God gets it. You are rarely closer to God than at that moment when your hands are willingly bound by the freedom of your kids. To yourself, recognize that that's the powerlessness of love. To let other people make their choices in freedom. Oh, we can protest it all we want. We can try everything in our arsenal to try to get them to change their mind. But in the end, we can't make them change their mind. We cannot. And that's a unity with God that we can know. They can be free. They have to be free to screw up their lives, just like we were at that point in our life. But we can keep hoping beyond hope that somewhere along the way we did our best. And then let go. It's in every marriage to suffer the freedom of your spouse, suffering that you freely accept when you chose to marry him or her, because this is love, to be willingly bound before the freedom of your spouse. Being married is being willingly bound before each other's freedom. It's to be Isaac in your home sometimes. This is the gift we give others because God gave it to us. We are all Isaacs sometime. We would do well to willingly suffer, willingly allow, give permission to the suffering that comes with the choices others make that affect our lives. To accept their decision to move, for example, to move out of town, to move somewhere else in the world. For sure, for a time to try to talk them out of it, but then again, as I just said, to know when to stop talking and accept. We can only pray for that grace. You and I are making choices in our lives all the time that cause suffering to others who love you, who love me. Your choices leave them suffering sometimes. For sure, most are willing to love you through and to the other side of this. But nevertheless, while you were following your dream, someone was suffering the letting go of theirs. Someone was hurting in the wake of your freedom to choose away from them. Whether you're leaving a job they enjoyed very much sharing with you, or a town where you built something together and lots of memories, or just because you saw it as they saw it as the best option for you. Somebody's suffering your choices, and it will hurt them. It's even harder when we are struggling with them possibly making a bad choice, and we can't do anything about it, like God. I'll never forget a time a while back when I'd invested a whole lot in a group of students that I'd worked with a long time, maybe 6 or 7 years actually. And when it was time for them to leave, one particular student become alum wrote me a note saying, "Thank you for what you, Father Gary, are suffering because of my leaving you and the CSC and the community in St. Louis. Thank you for that." That's it. And I have to tell you that I really didn't need him to say that, but I choked up because it was so thoughtful and helped me in the letting go that year. I rarely find anyone that tuned in to the ones left behind, to the Isaacs. While you are on the way to something you wanted and chose, someone is getting left waving at the bus station, waving at the airport, waving from the parking lot. I can promise you that if you notice that and say something like thanks, they may not need to hear it, but it will go a long way for their healing, for their letting go. In that moment, they are your Isaac. Look around for your Isaacs in your life. Who in your life is a victim of your choices? Even though it is the right decision most days, somebody will suffer your decision, somebody. It's what happens in families and communities and friendships and careers and faith communities when we get close. It's what happens. Thank you for getting close enough to you. Thank them for getting close enough to you to suffer your decisions, especially to leave. Believe me, it helps. And allow me, if you would, to practice what I preach. Some of you are having a hard time with my decision to retire in July. Let me take the opportunity right now to say to you, thank you for suffering whatever it is in you, whatever is of that in you. It's a great act of love for me that you would be willing to suffer that, to honor my choice, to respect the rest of my life. It's a great act of love for me in your willingness to accept and allow that for my sake. In this circumstance, you are my Isaacs. In that moment, victims of my decision to go. And I love you even more for it. You being willing to do the work of letting me go. You see, Isaac is the spouse left behind, the friends left behind, the parent left behind, the community left behind, even if what they're doing is doing what God is asking. Yep. It really sucks to be Isaac.